Welcome to the January Donovan Show. I'm so grateful to be here and meet a new friend. Elyse, as I'm reading her bio, and I think just even I would say, the synergy of wholeness that we briefly spoke about. So I am excited to actually dive in this conversation of selling from wholeness, but I'm just going to just share with you her beautiful, I would just say, hard work that's built your bio, because that's what it really is. So Elyse is international speaker, founder of the Superhuman Selling and She Sells movement, which I'd love to sort of dive in. And she empowers entrepreneurs and sales professionals to revolutionize how they sell. The quantum leap. I love it. And she is a top Salesforce influencer and thought leaders. And I know that you've worked with Lewis House, a lot of the top influencers as well. So welcome. And I know that you have a She Sells Radio as well. Welcome to this conversation of selling, because I think that it's a taboo conversation, especially for women. Yes. And, for me, I train women, and I always say every woman needs to learn how to sell. I have to learn to sell homework. I have to learn how to sell, chores to my children. So today I want to maybe sort of begin introducing yourself and even what brought you to this line of work.
Sure, absolutely. No, this is going to be so fun. And I appreciate the work you're doing wholeheartedly. It's so aligned with the underlying principles that we want to teach our community as well. So this is really an honor and fun. So my background was I actually went to school for journalism, and I remember very vividly in my news ed class one day. This will probably date me because I was going to be a newspaper reporter.
Love it.
I remember
age comes wisdom. So that's it.
Yes. I mean, there is that. I've called this actually my year of wisdom. So yeah, but I remember my professor saying how much we could anticipate to make as newspaper reporters. And even in my relatively naive state back then in my late teens, early 20s, I remember thinking, that doesn't seem like a lot. And I was simultaneously also very motivated, very driven. I worked multiple jobs at the same time during college just because I liked financial freedom. And so when I got out of school, I was like, I'm actually going to go into sales. And I went into corporate media sales. And I found myself in my mid to late 20s having built up the life that I thought was going to make me happy. So think 6-figure corporate sales job, top of the leaderboard at work, nice house, nice car. And what I wasn't telling anyone, January, was inside, I was so broken and I was so ashamed of how I was feeling. And I didn't know what was off. I had crippling anxiety. I had panic attacks. I had an eating disorder. I was in a marriage that was really unhealthy in so many ways. And I felt very lost. And I remember right before I turned 28, 28's always been a special number for me. I was born on the 28th, and it's just always had a lot of resonance. I remember saying, I get one shot, at least in this lifetime, in this body, to be 28. And I am not going to go through my 28th year being so miserable as I have been up until this point. And there's a beautiful, I think Anais Nin is how you pronounce their name, but a beautiful quote that says, the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud became greater than the risk it took to blossom. And so I made a decision in that moment to unravel everything that I had built up in my life up until that point. And I left the marriage. I left my corporate job where there was a lot of nasty stuff going on behind the scenes. I knew I wanted to go out and become an entrepreneur, but I had one client who had paid me $300 to review a sales presentation for him. And I guess I was so motivated at that point. I was like, I can make money outside of work. I'll take it. It gets me out of here. And I went on this journey of unraveling everything I thought to be true about life and success and what I actually wanted. And I went on a really profound personal development journey, and it's 10 years now. So I turned 38 next week. So it's been a 10-year journey. There's been a lot of learnings along the way. Now remarried to a wonderful man. We've got 2 kids, like a lot of happiness there, have a successful business. But one thing that really, I would say has been transformational just in the past several years of my journey is even after I unraveled all of that and got in a much better place emotionally and personally, I was still driven to achieve more in my life and in my career. And yet for a period of 10 years, even after I got out of corporate and then became an entrepreneur, no matter what I did, I couldn't break past the six-figure mark in earnings. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a beautiful amount. That's, that's, you can live very abundantly with that. And yet there was something on my heart that was calling me to more, a greater life, a more expansive life, et cetera. But no matter what I did, and I was doing all the right tactical things, I couldn't break through that threshold. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was programmed to make that amount. And I had a lot of limiting beliefs about allowing myself to expand into more. So this was only a couple of years ago now, when I made a very dramatic at the time investment in myself for coaching and development, which is why I love and appreciate what you do with your programs. And because of how much I had put on the line financially, I had to come face to face with every limiting belief I ever had about money, worthiness, abundance, success, all of it. And in facing all of those limiting beliefs and learning to return to a state of true wholeness within myself, in 6 weeks, I was able to 10x my income and turn my annual income into my monthly income, working less. And it inspired this concept that we now teach of selling from wholeness, because previously it had always been about, when I make the sale, then I'll be worthy. When I do that, then I'll be validated. When I have that amount, then I'll be good enough. And it was never enough, and I could never get there. But when I learned to become whole within myself and realize all the junk I'd been telling myself about not being worthy, not being enough, clients not wanting to work with me in a certain way, when I learned to dismantle that and start to see myself as whole, worthy, perfect, in alignment with the goals that I desired, then everything I'd been seeking and chasing for so long came in. And it wasn't about working harder. It wasn't about hard selling. It wasn't about hard closing. So it is a very long explanation to say that I say that sales is the Trojan horse in our community, because a lot of people want to grow in sales, and we teach that and we care about that. And when we just focus on the strategy and on the tactical actions we're taking, according to neuroscience, that's 2 to 5% of what's going to create your results, right? You know this, you get this, you train this. I'm sure your listeners know this too. So when we get under the hood and help someone figure out what are the gaps in their identity and who they're being and how they're perceiving themselves that are holding them back from achieving their goals, then the quantum leap happens. Then we can achieve superhuman selling. So please take that wherever you want to go. But
That's a lot.
that's my background in my heart. I know it was a ton.
No, it's beautiful. Thank you for vulnerably sharing even your journey prior to 28, because I think in some ways that is the cry of the woman today. This idea that the perpetual rat race of never feeling good enough. And I think, so much of the work that I do is because there's no training in how to be a woman. There's no training in how to be a friend, how to find the right partner for you, how to develop yourself as a woman. I really feel like we're just trying to figure out life as it goes, suffering unnecessarily, anxiety, stress. So it's a common story. And I think that we're so wounded because there's no training. That's the common story. It's that. And some women never figure it out. Some women are still in the rat race, Elyse. And I find it even beautiful that somehow at 28 you had the wisdom. You say this is your year for wisdom to even say enough. Like, I need to do something. I think that takes a lot of courage, because what you're probably doing is, I would imagine, is kind of going above your comfort, going above your norm, going above maybe even your peers, to say, no, there's something off, I don't want to live a life of quiet unfulfillment, which is often what I see women right now. And is that they don't even want, fulfills them, or what's making them unfulfilled. And so maybe I want to go back, and then I kind of want to build up to that. What was it that caused you to live that rat race of chasing sort of this rabbit hole of never good enough? Like, what led you there?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Great question. And it's interesting. Like, I'm feeling emotional about it while you ask about it, because I remember being there and my heart is so with anyone who finds themselves there. Because I remembered at the time, I knew something was off, and I knew something was off for a long time in my life, but I was numbing. I was not listening. That was actually how I came across podcasts, because I had long drives for my corporate sales job, but I didn't like being alone, because the voice in my head would get so loud about like, you've got to do something. This isn't right. Life is off. But I just didn't, it felt so uncomfortable to think about making that change. So I found podcasting and thought, great, I don't have to listen to my own thoughts for a while.
That's actually really
So
profound. Even though you're about to explain it, I'm like, do you
yeah,
know how many women probably are numbing because they cannot be alone with their own thoughts because it hurts
yeah,
so much?
yes. Oh my
Like,
gosh.
it's
Yes.
exactly what you're feeling. And part of it too is that there's no language for the ache. There,
Mm,
like it's almost like a compounding ache because of a lack of wholeness in every arena of our life. But it's
yeah.
not like we can say, well, I actually, because I feel like I'm proving myself, or I feel like I'm not admired by the guy I'm with, or I don't have the friendship that fulfills me, or my home is chaotic. I think we have no language for the suffering that we're enduring, but we are feeling, and that's sort of what you're doing is,
Yeah.
what are you supposed to do, right? Sometimes the wound is so big that we have to numb ourselves.
Mm, yes. Oh my gosh. And I love how you call it the ache, because that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And it was so uncomfortable. And it was very much that experience. I'm a big Joe Dispenza fan and follower. I
Mhm.
appreciate his work. And so he talks about that gap when how you feel like you have to present on the outside is so different from how you're feeling inside. And that was, I had a big gap, like a really, really big gap, but it feels petrifying to say, what if I said what I'm actually feeling? What if I let it all go? What if I dismantled it and burned it down? Um, and I'm not downplaying or minimizing that choice for any woman who's in that, because it's everything you know up until that point. Um, you asked about, I think you asked about how did I make that choice, or what is that the question? Like what?
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I wanted to
Yeah,
point that out because I think it's
yeah.
massive. What I mean by that, I think I almost see it's universal ache of a woman to not even know what they're aching for. So
Yes.
I wanted to point that out. But yes, like
Yeah.
what sort of led you there to that point of really
Perfect.
kind of desperation?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for, okay, that's perfect. So I think what had happened, and I think along the way, this is probably part of the universal human journey. I'm pretty confident or certain, at least from everyone I know, I'd gotten away from the truth of who I was.
Mm.
And I had stopped doing the things that I loved. And this was years after I had a coach I was working with ask me, like, if you could live any 5 dream lives, what would they be? And for some reason, it was hard at first for me to think about that. But when she asked that question, I actually like let myself go there. I had things come up that were things that I thought were silly or I thought were impossible. And so many of them were tied to what I had loved as a little girl back in childhood. And it was stuff like being a makeup artist, or creating a media brand, or spending time with horses and nature. And along the way in my early teens, then going into my 20s, I had lost connection to all of those parts of me, because one, I was so driven on just, I really wanted freedom. I didn't want to have to depend on anybody for income or any, it was just part of my upbringing and background. I really was kind of molded, and I took the path of success, and career success was what I was seeking and looking to achieve from my late 20s on. Um, and so in that process, I lost connection with who I really was. And so I was just seeking from the outside, like, this relationship will make me feel worthy and good enough, or making this amount of money will make me feel worthy and good enough, or if I can look a certain way, then I'll get the attention that I need to feel secure. And so it was just constant external seeking for what I didn't know at the time, but what I know now is like something I could only give myself, which was that journey back to wholeness, which you teach. So that was that. And then, yeah, it reached the point where the pain was so much of continuing to live that way. And I just remember saying, I'm not going to do 28 this way. I get one shot at it. And it felt petrifying. I was so afraid of the judgment of what it would mean to be divorced. especially because I'd only been married like 16 months. I was afraid of leaving the corporate job and everything I knew there. But I think there's just those times, like that was really my first time that I can remember of truly listening to intuition, which was screaming, like, you got to change a lot, sister. And so I listened. And since then, it's become a guiding force in my life that has guided me through many more challenging leaps and bounds along the way. But it's easier every time we listen to it because we learn we can trust it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think part of, I've worked obviously for 25 years training women. And part of the thing that I see is that there's no infrastructure in studying the desires of our heart in every arena of our lives. And what I mean by that is desire actually means North Star, right?
Yeah.
And so if you look at yourself as a little girl with horses or wanting to makeup artist, I think that in our school system or even in our home life, what do you love? What do you desire? Like the conversation of awareness of the desires of our heart, I think need to be explored in every season of our life. And I think, how would you know what you want if you've never studied the desires of your heart? And I think I see this all the time. Either we indulge in our desires or we inhibit our desires. I think our desires need to be matured, right? I might want to binge on Netflix, right? Or I might want to eat whatever I want. But ultimately, I think the lack of, I would say, formation, which means the training of our own desires to align it in harmony, I think, with our highest good is not present in the training of how to be a woman. I just think it's so why do we end up in a divorce or in a relationship or being an unhappy mom? Because we've never probably designed it. We were living by default as a design of our culture, literally like whatever you want, whatever you feel like, as opposed to saying, how would I want every arena of my life to feel like, to look like? And is that in harmony with, I think, the deepest desires of what is my highest good? I think that's a training, Elyse, that I just feel like, if we just even prepared women to understand the layers of depth of their desires in every arena of our life, we would save women from the anxiety and the stress that I think you endured. I always think women are suffering unnecessarily because we are undertrained. We are overwhelmed because we're underskilled. We're underskilled because we're undertrained. And to me, I ache for you because I feel like the revolution right now is interior freedom. Like freedom, we have freedom in the Western world, but data tells us women are not free to become who they fully want to become in their highest form. And I think that's the new feminist movement that I think is almost unfolding, as we journey kind of like, yeah, we need a voice. We need, but the freedom, the interior freedom to become fully alive.
Yes.
In the design that we want. So I think that's, to me, what really it speaks a story. And I think interior freedom begins with unconditional understanding of our worth. But right now we call in the women's school, we call it the poisonous pea. Our worth has been poisoned by, what makes women valuable or worth it. The way our culture is conditioned is power, possession, popularity, perfection, and production. That's ruin our value. That is not our value. Nothing changes our value. Not postpartum weight, not how much money you make, not what you look, but think about it. 4-year-old, 10-year-old, 11, what conditioning from the school system, if you get an A, that makes you more valuable. If you are thinner, if you're more popular, if you've got position of power, literally almost from day one, women have been conditioned to poison their worth. And then we wonder when we wake up one day why we are chasing a false god of perfection. And now success has become our own prison in the way we define it. And that's, I wrote the book, Redefine Success for Women, because I feel like the way, we have conditioned women to chase success, we should have enough money. We should have freedom. We should have a voice. But it shouldn't be a prison for us. It should be a place of freedom. But why has it become such a slavery? And I think it's because of a lack of wholeness. If we're just chasing money, if we're just chasing this thin body and perfection, but we're not looking at our environment, we're not looking at the woman we're designing, our mental, emotional, physical health, our home life, our environment, if we're not looking at our wealth, our family, then inevitably, it doesn't matter how much money you make if you don't have friendships that are based on depth and contribution or intimacy that makes you feel fully alive, eventually that money is going to feel like a burden. Eventually, if you're just, I also see the one side. It's like, I just want to be a mom. I just want to be, I don't want to make money. And so you literally throw yourself into motherhood, which is noble, right? You're a mom, but you're not thinking, I also need to design my own purpose. I also need to figure out how I maximize potential. I also need to make sure that I'm not falling into the trap of mommy brain. This idea that I've lost a sense of myself because I'm a mom of 8, and this idea of hot mess mama movement to me has, I think, disregarded the reverence for motherhood and what true success is in every arena of our life, which means you can have all the money in the world, but you're unhappy, mom, you are not happy, period. And your marriage is not thriving. So, I share this with you because I think we're all in the same boat of being conditioned that only parts of us matter, when in reality, when the truth is that every part of us equally matters. And if we don't take a stand against the cultural narrative of the poisonous pea, then we become what I'm seeing is a generational crisis of stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And I think we stand against it. And we need to have language for this life of wholeness, which you're selling, so from a place of wholeness, because we can, like you said, we can neurologically train somebody with the right systematic training. But if parts of themselves are so wounded because they have numbed themselves, whether it's friendship or intimacy, then their success has a time limit.
Oh my gosh.
It's unsustainable capacity for contribution.
Yes.
And that's why I think wholeness, to me, when you said you're selling from wholeness, it's not, I don't believe it's optional. I think it's the solution to our future, where we've been told only parts of us matter. I think it needs to be a kind of a new revolution of the new movement for this new woman is that she is whole, that she's selling from a place of interior freedom. She knows who she is. She is not, a victim to her power, her possession, because that is a slavery.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. Amen. 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 Amen.
So let's pivot into selling, because I think, I wanted to get the foundation, I think, because every woman that sells understand this ache. I truly believe, and so let's pivot into selling, because tell me, what does it mean for you to sell from a place of wholeness?
Well, there's so much in what you just said where I was like, oh my gosh, this is gold. So yes, let's speak to selling from wholeness.
You can
Side
respond,
note,
honestly.
yeah.
I'd love to hear your heart, and then we can pivot later.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it all relates. It all relates. So side note, we're going to have you on She Sells Radio to come on and talk about wholeness, because this is like a deeper level of the conversation that I want women to hear. So we'll do that, and you all can listen to January on our podcast too. But this concept, there's a few things that you shared that so resonate. One, I think this is epigenetics, for us as women, it's passed down. And I even remember, and if my mom listens to this, this is all said in love. I remember her, she didn't trust herself as a woman. She was never taught how to be safe, how to feel safe as a woman. That got passed on to me. And when we got pregnant the very first time, I remember being in so much fear about having a miscarriage and not trusting my body to be able to do what it needed to do. And sure enough, I miscarried our first baby. And this is not to say, not to make myself wrong for it because I know so many women have had their own experience there, but I share that to say that there was such a brokenness and a disconnection between myself and my body and its wisdom and the desires. And the phrase you use, which I've never heard used before, and I love so much, and it does tie in with selling, is this interior freedom. And I was training October in our group programs, and our 10K club is all about money and wealth. And I was training wealth and money mindset this month, and really getting into, at its core, why do we want more money? At the pure foundation of it, why do we want more money? And at a surface level, we want more money because we want freedom, right? We want time and money freedom. If you get deeper, though, what I think we're really seeking is that freedom to be the fullest expression of who we are, whatever and however that looks. And I love the phrase you used of that interior freedom, because that is, I think at its core, that's what we're actually seeking when we're seeking wealth and money and abundance, is that. And so it relates to selling, because when we are selling from brokenness and when we're selling from lack and doing something I call scarcity selling versus abundance selling, you are always making something outside of you your source. So your worthiness and your validation depends on whether this prospect says yes to you or not. It depends on, did you close the deal? It depends on how much money is in the bank. I remember when I was in corporate sales, and I had many great teachers in my sales career, and I worked for a boss who was a great teacher in many ways, meaning he taught me what I needed to know, not what I enjoyed learning at the time. But he would stand at the leaderboard when I would come back from a sales call and be waiting with like a Sharpie marker on the whiteboard to like mark down a sale. Mm. And if I didn't get it, he would just shake his head and walk away and walk back to his office. And I remember so much shame and fear and guilt. And I was a top performer, but no one closes them all. I didn't close them all. And because of that, so much internal pressure I put on myself to try to close every deal, even if it wasn't in the best interest of the customer. I was so wrapped up in this stuff at the time because I put all of my validation and worth in how much production I had. So to that,
P at play.
the poisonous P. I love that. I love was it the 5 Ps, the poisonous Ps? Is that right?
Poisonous P, poisons our worth. That's what really, that's a story that, but see, here you are. And this is why I say it's such a cultural conditioning. Here you are, driven, top producer, and you still fell into the trap.
Oh yeah.
Because what it really is about epigenetics. Like, we have been so conditioned to just assume that our worth is so tied up to our wealth, to our power, to our position, that you allowed that man to roll his eyes in your beautiful soul. Like, do you know how many women, I just want to say, I train women, I'm like, when you come face to face with men who devalues you, you either hold them accountable or you've created a monster out of them. And and it's not that we want to, it's that we don't know how to. He angers me. Like, and you say that to me, I'm like, what was the script there? To be able to say, I'm doing the best I can. I don't think I deserve you rolling your eyes. I don't think it's respectful, especially to a woman. Like, we ought to say that in deep respect for him, to also hold him accountable to his own life of wholeness, because he can't treat people that way.
Yeah.
And expect, for him to actually have high performers continue to want to stay there. You'd probably choose to leave, right? But anyways, that's a pivot, but it angers me because it's so embedded in our culture. We don't even know what's happening.
Yes, absolutely. And my experience there, and I'd actually be really curious, your perspective on this, was that it was not safe. It did not feel safe to speak up in that way. Right. And so
it makes total sense, because when your worth is on the line, it is what you have as a woman. Therefore, what are you trying to do? You're trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
And what does every woman ache for? I call this ache of admiration. That is like unimaginable for a woman. But we call also the 5 levels of lovability. And the last one, appreciation, acknowledgement, affection. Like, and what I mean by that is, like, the fact that you couldn't even say to him, it's like, that's disrespectful. We are so conditioned to just almost allow other people to devalue us because we don't know our value. And it goes back to sort of what I'm saying is like, I see this all the time, Elyse, know your worth, love yourself, you are worthy, you're enough. And I always say, but how? You can tell me that till you're blue. You can even neurologically wire that in my brain, scientifically. But if I don't even know what makes me valuable, then it's not sustainable.
Mm,
It's like, I am grateful, I'm grateful, I'm grateful. It's like your empty affirmation. I am wealthy, but you don't know what makes you. I mean, it doesn't, you can wire it, but it can't sustain it because
yeah.
you'll always have a doubt underneath it. And so this is the idea. It's like, how do we expect women to know their value, love themselves, find their truth if they don't know thyself?
Mm,
It goes back to Socrates. And I'm like, this idea, love your neighbor, love yourself. I'm like, an untrained woman is incapable of loving herself if she's incapable of knowing herself. How many women do not know themselves? And I'll tell you that because women don't even know the desires of their heart. Who
mm,
taught you to discover the deepest desires of your heart in every season of your life, to honor your wounds, to harvest from it, to put language to it? And so we have women right now who are, alive, but are not living because they don't know themselves. They cannot therefore love themselves. And
yes.
so now they're selling something they can't sell because you're selling yourself in every sale.
Mm,
How can you sell something if you don't even know who you are?
oh
This
my
is why
God.
I'm so passionate about training is the antidote to why women are suffering right now, because that gives us a language for life of wholeness. But to me, know thyself
Mm, yes.
is a
Yes.
prerequisite to loving thyself. Now you can sell whatever. Your
Yes.
worth is not on the line. You can look
Exactly.
at that man and you can say, I can be detached from the outcome, hold him accountable because my worth is never on the line. I know who I am.
Gosh. Yes. Yes. Wow. It's it's so powerful, this conversation, because to your point and to the credit of what you do, I think most women are never taught this, right? We're never taught this. At least my conditioning growing up was, if you feel uncomfortable, suppress stuff, like don't talk about it, bury it. And so there was so much that just got suppressed and stuffed. And I think that really started that disconnect early on from intuition and body and desires, and my devaluation of myself, to where I didn't feel comfortable to speak up, or even in, tying it back in with sales. This can, I think it can manifest so many different ways when we're not selling from wholeness, whether it's saying yes to clients you don't actually want to work with, right? Like we've done that, where, man, like I really want to hit this goal and this target, or I just want to feel liked. So even though this client, I can tell they're going to push boundaries, I can tell they're not going to be fun to work with, I'm going to just suppress what I'm feeling and suppress my intuition. And I'm just going to say yes. Every single time I've done that, I regretted it. And I'm so clear on that now in my life. And it's like, I don't care how much money someone is willing to pay. If it's going to be an energy leak or an energy drain for me, if they're going to devalue me,
But it is.
then that's
And it's
not,
not worth it.
no,
It's
it's
not worth
not.
it if you know that that you have that you're not seen as a valuable human being, that your worth is
Mm-hmm.
actually questioned.
Yeah.
I mean, why should you? And I think that that's why, pushing back against, I would say, even selling to those that don't honor your value is a sign of respect for us, for us women. And I just think, at least, like, I just feel like when you're talking about, you can't do the sales, but it's really the same thing even in relationship. It's the
Yeah.
same thing in friendship. You know, we're selling in friendship as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're selling the value of who we are. And I think that's where I feel like if we just understood our value and understand who we are, know ourselves and our unconditional worth. And I kind of even use the neuroscience of our brain and our, understanding the trillions of ourselves. I'm like, that's evidence of your rarity.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you can, by logic alone, you can logically say that you're an irreplaceable, unequivocally, undeniably, unrepeatable human being,
Yeah.
which makes us what? Our value priceless.
Yes.
But we have to own that, and I
Mm.
just think that if we can get women to sell from that place of wholeness, because that's what I think that we are selling everywhere we go. But obviously in sales, you have to close those sales, but unless we're detached from it, I just feel like we carry the unnecessary burden of,
Yes.
of
Mm.
pain. And it compounds. That's what I was gonna say. I'm like, like you've separated from yourself. And that's why I think the ache comes from a compounding pain over
Mm,
and over of, again, of having to prove your value, of not knowing your value, and to a point where like, I don't even know, it's just cancer all over. I don't even know where it comes from.
yeah.
It's just a gaping ache that
Yes.
begins with not knowing our value.
Yes. Exactly. And it's, I mean, this is to your point, it's not just sales, it's everything, right? It impacts every area of your life. And what I think is so powerful is if we tie this specific to the foundation, like specific to sales, when you sell from this foundation of feeling good and feeling whole and knowing your worth, I redefine closing. Like closing does not just mean getting a yes. Closing means helping someone make the best decision in their highest and best interest, right? The best decision for them in their highest and best interest. So that can mean a no. Like it can mean you close it and you got a no. Now, when we are whole and worthy and good in ourselves, we're able to go deep with someone down the rabbit hole of concerns and objections and helping them get through those. So I'll ask some questions that some people will be really uncomfortable to ask on a sales call because I'm detached from the outcome. I can
Mhm.
tell it's something that would actually be in the best interest of someone. And so I'm going to go there. I'll never want something for someone more than they want it for themselves. So I think that's another part of selling from wholeness, especially I'm guessing you have a lot of coaches in your community and consultants in your community where like, man, we want the transformation for someone. We know what would happen if they just said yes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I had a great mentor one time say, go where you're wanted, not where you're needed. And that really transformed my relationship with sales at the time because I was so accustomed to like, I've got to convince, I've got to like pull and drag this person along with me. It's a disempowering energy for anyone to be in. So again, it's this fine line of like being willing to go deep with someone and ask the things that might make you uncomfortable, but are really in their best interest to help them overcome their internal resistance to saying yes for their transformation, but then also being detached from the outcome. And if someone isn't ready to level up to be in your energy, they're not the right client for you. And that's where abundance mindset is so critical with
Yeah,
this.
and I think
So,
you said that beautifully, really, Elyse, because I think that's what's probably missing in the sales. I would say, in the consultants is that level of detachment.
mhm.
That I think to learn how to do that, I think it's obviously,
Yeah,
such a skill. But imagine if that was the case, where they can be so free to sell
yeah.
because their worth is never on the line. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, what you teach. Well, maybe a final
Mhm.
question here. If you were, you know, giving somebody advice to sell from a life of wholeness, maybe what would you give women advice specifically to even begin to sell from a life of wholeness?
Sure. So I think doing the work to return to that state of wholeness is it. That's it. I think that's the journey we're all on, is that journey back to wholeness. And I think some of us get there in this lifetime, some of us don't. It's like it's all our own experience of it. Um, but I think I would really look at, where are you attached right now? Where are your attachments? So are you attached to someone saying yes to you on a call? Are you attached to making a certain amount of money every month? And you can tell you're attached to it because there's fear if it doesn't happen, right? Like I've built a beautiful life for myself and my family. And yet I know that I'm not like calling this in, but if for some reason it had to all go and we had to start over, I would still feel good and
Mm,
whole and worthy because it's not attached to any of that.
yes.
Um, and so when we can come from that place, and that's the deep inner, that's the deep inner work, right? So that's why it's so good that you've got your community and what you all are doing and your podcast. But I think that's the key. And then from that place, when you can get a no, I got a no from a client the other day, and it was like, man, I know it would have been good for her. Like, man, I know she would have really thrived in our community, but she couldn't quite get herself there. And I could look at the no in the email, and it did, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel rejected. I felt a little sad for her, but I didn't make it mean anything about me. And
Mm,
that's when we know we're in that place. And again, it's going to permeate to every area of your life. But your experience of sales will dramatically transform when you're doing the work to become whole. And then from that place, because clients don't feel that subconscious desire on your part to close them, and they don't feel any of the attachment in your energy, you will actually close more sales for a yes, because people can pick up on you truly have their best interest at heart.
Wow. What
So
you're
yeah.
defining is almost interior freedom, you know,
Yes.
you're free because you're detached from the outcome. And so
Yeah.
I think that's really beautiful. And I think that I always say it's never an arrival. It's it's a constant evolving of a higher best self. Because I do think, even for myself, well, I know that intellectually, I feel like I have to constantly work towards making sure I stand guard against
Yes.
my own weakness when I feel I'm in that vulnerable place, and I think that I think we always need to sort of stand guard, and it's really real, because I think it is personal, it's personal, but we have to make it not personal. But we have to
Yeah.
really, coach ourselves, to almost remind ourselves of who we are. I think that's what it is.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for this rich conversation. And I hope that we can even have you again, and maybe you can share some insights even in our coaching school someday, and to kind of, really what it would look like to be so free to sell because your life is whole. I can imagine the unpacking that probably needs to happen. And that really is the goal, I think for this new phase of women. I really believe that, is that interior freedom to be fully whole so we can be fully alive. So thank you, Elyse. Any last minute, perhaps, wisdom that you can share? I know this is your year of wisdom to our viewers that are listening.
Wow, this is so powerful. Thank you. And yes, I'd be honored to come in and serve in the coaching school in whatever way I can. So thank you for that. Yeah, I'm just really in the vibe and the awareness in my own life at a higher level than ever before of everything is always happening for me. And remembering that when you set that next level intention for your life, whether it's a next level of career success or relationships or family, or health, you're going to get a mirror back of the areas in which you're not currently whole in those areas. And it's nothing wrong. You haven't done something wrong, but that's the mirror of the work you get to do. So when we can see that and know, okay, I didn't do something wrong. However, I'm so loved. I'm so supported. Universe, God, source loves me so much that I'm being shown what are the areas I get to heal in myself to be able to ascend to my next level. Then we can, I think, move through it with a lot more grace than if we make it wrong and we get into resistance about it. So that is what I would say. If you've been given one of those mirrors after you set your next level goals, like, just know it's part of the process. There's nothing wrong, and you get to love yourself through that process as well. So that's
That's a
final words of
beautiful.
wisdom.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's beautiful. And I think that we could not end on a better note, because I think, like you said, I think that's to move in grace,
Yeah.
to be able, because I think it's part of the journey, right? And I don't think it's an inescapable part of, I think, the thing that allows us to ascend to that next level. So thank you so much for this time, Elyse. And I'm looking forward to even deeper conversation, because we've talked about sales sort of, but we really talked about how to be a woman and human. And I really appreciate that in this work. So thank you all. I'm just so grateful. Until the next time.